Adolf Hitler. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler was one of the most powerful and infamous dictators of the 20th century. After World War I, he rose to power in the National Socialist German Workers' Party, taking control of the German government in 1933. His establishment of concentration camps to inter-Jews and other groups he believed to be a threat to Aryan supremacy resulted in the death of more than 6 million people in the Holocaust. His attack on Poland in 1939 started World War II, and by 1941, Germany occupied much of Europe and North Africa. The tide of the war turned following an invasion of Russian and a U.S. entry into battle, and Hitler killed himself shortly before Germany. From the Western Allies, he relied more on Admiral Karl Dönitz to hold them off by submarine warfare. When that effort was blunted in 1943, he both supported the building of new types of submarines and geared strategy on the northern portion of the Eastern Front into protection of the Baltic area, where new submarines and crews could be run in. Enormous resources were also allocated to 2 new weapons designed to destroy London. It was Hitler's hope that the Germans could drive any Allied troops who landed in the west into the sea and then move substantial forces east in the interval before any second invasion. When this plan failed, Hitler turned to holding all ports as long as possible to hamper Allied supply lines and to prepare for a counterstroke that would defeat the Western Allies. This counterstroke, the Battle of the Bulge, would then provide the opportunity to move forces east on Germany. Hitler increasingly hoped for a split in the alliance he had forged against himself. He believed Germany had lost World War I because of the collapse of the home front, and systematic killing of all Jews would guarantee victory this time. When the end was near, he married his mistress, and then Japanese planes filled the sky over Pearl Harbor. Bombs and bullets rained onto the vessels moored below. At 8:10, a 1,800-pound bomb smashed through the deck of the battleship USS Arizona and landed in her forward ammunition magazine. The ship exploded and sank with more than 1,000 men trapped inside. Next, torpedoes pierced the shell of the battleship USS Oklahoma. With 400 sailors aboard, the USS Oklahoma lost her balance, rolled onto her side, and slipped underwater. By the time the attack was over, every battleship in Pearl Harbor, USS Arizona, USS Oklahoma, USS California, USS West Virginia, USS Utah, USS Maryland, USS Pennsylvania, USS Tennessee, and USS Nevada has sustained significant damage. Before 8 a.m. on December 7, 1941, hundreds of Japanese fighter planes attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor near Honolulu, Hawaii. The barrage lasted just 2 hours, but it was devastating. The Japanese managed to destroy nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 enormous battleships and more than 300 airplanes. More than 2,000 American soldiers and sailors died in the attack, and another 1,000 were wounded. The day after the assault, President Franklin D. Roosevelt asked Congress to declare war on Japan. Congress approved his declaration with just one dissenting vote. 3 days later, Japanese allies Germany and Italy also declared war on the United States. And again, Congress reciprocated. More than 2 years into the conflict, America had finally joined World Simple, destroy the Pacific Fleet. That way, the Americans would not be able to fight back as Japan's armed forces spread across the South Pacific. On December 7th, after months of planning and practice, the Japanese launched their Manhattan Project. Early in 1939, the world scientific community discovered that German physicists had learned the secrets of splitting a uranium atom. Fear soon spread over the possibility of Nazi scientists utilizing that energy to produce a bomb capable of unspeakable destruction. Scientists Albert Einstein, who fled Nazi persecution, and Enrico Fermi, who escaped fascist Italy, were now living in the United States. They agreed that the president must be informed of the dangers of atomic technology in the hands of the Axis powers. Fermi traveled to Washington in March to express his concerns on government officials, but few shared his uneasiness. Einstein penned a letter to President Roosevelt urging the development of an atomic research program later that year. Roosevelt saw neither the necessity nor the utility for such a project, but agreed to proceed slowly. In late 1941, the American effort to design and build an atomic bomb received its codename, the Manhattan Project. At first, the research was based at only a few universities: Columbia University, the University of Chicago, and the University of California at Berkeley. A breakthrough occurred in December 1942 when Fermi led a group of physicists to produce the first controlled nuclear chain reaction under the grandstands of Stagg Field at the University of Chicago. Summer of 1945, Oppenheimer was ready to test the first bomb. On July 16, 1945, at Trinity State near Alamogordo, New Mexico, scientists of the Manhattan Project readied themselves to watch the detonation of the world's first atomic bomb. The device was set to a 100-foot tower and discharged just before dawn. No one was properly prepared for the result. A blinding flash, visible for 200 miles, lit up the morning sky. A mushroom cloud reached 40,000 feet, blowing out windows of civilian homes up to 100 miles away. When the cloud returned to Earth, it created a half-mile-wide crater metamorphosing sand into glass. A bogus cover-up story was quickly released, explaining that a huge ammunition dump had just exploded in the desert. Soon, word reached President Truman in Potsdam, Germany, that the project was Holocaust. The word Holocaust, from the Greek words holos, hole, and kossos, burn, was historically used to describe a sacrificial offering burned on an altar. Since 1945, the word has taken on a new and horrible meaning: the mass murder of 6 million European Jews, as well as some of other persecuted groups such as gypsies and homosexuals, by the German Nazi regime during the Second World War. To the anti-Semitic Nazi leader Adolf Hitler, Jews were an inferior race, an alien threat to German racial purity and community. After years of Nazi rule in Germany, during which Jews were consistently persecuted, Hitler's final solution, now known as the Holocaust, came to fruition under the cover of World War, with mass killing centers constructed in the concentration camps of occupied spring and summer of 1940. The German army expanded Hitler's empire in Europe, conquering Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. Beginning in 1941, Jews from all over the continent, as well as hundreds of thousands of European gypsies, were transported to the Polish ghettos. The German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 marked a new level of brutality in warfare. Mobile killing units called Einsatzgruppen would murder more than 500,000 Soviet Jews and others, usually by shooting, over the course of the German occupation. Spring of 1945, German leadership was dissolving amid internal dissent, with Göring and Himmler both seeking to distance themselves from Hitler and take power. In his last will and political testament, dictated in a German bunker that April 29th, Hitler blamed the war on international Jewry and its helpers, and urged the German leaders and people to follow the strict observance of the racial laws and with merciless resistance against the universal prisoners of all the peoples, the Jews. The following day, he committed suicide. Germany's formal surrender in World War II came barely a week later, on May 8, 1940. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was the dictator of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, from 1929 to 1953. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union was transformed from a peasant society into an industrial and military superpower. However, he ruled with terror, and millions of his own citizens died during his brutal reign. Born into poverty, Stalin became involved in revolutionary politics as well as criminal activities as a young man. After Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin died, Stalin outmaneuvered his rivals for control of the party. Once in power, he collectivized farming and potential enemies executed or sent to forced labor camps. Stalin aligned with the United States and Britain in World War II, but afterward engaged in an increasingly tense relationship with the West known as the Cold War, 1946 to 1991. After his death, the Soviets initiated a de-Stalinization. In 1912, Lenin, then in exile in Switzerland, appointed Joseph Stalin to serve on the First Central Committee of the Bolshevik Party. 3 years later, in November 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia. The Soviet Union was founded in 1922 with Lenin as its first leader. During these years, Stalin had continued to move up the party ladder, and in 1922, he became Secretary General of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, a role that enabled him to appoint his allies to government jobs and grow a base of political support. After Lenin died in 1924, Stalin eventually outmaneuvered his rivals and won the power struggle for control of the Communist Party. By the late 1920s, he had become dictator of the Soviet Union. In 1939, in the eve of World War II, Joseph Stalin and German dictator Adolf Hitler signed a non-aggression pact. Stalin then proceeded to annex parts of Poland and Romania, as well as the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. He also launched an invasion of Finland. Then, in June 1941, Germany broke the Nazi-Soviet pact and invaded the USSR, making significant early inroads. Stalin had ignored warnings from the Americans and the British, as well as his own intelligence agents, about a potential invasion, and the Soviets were not prepared for war. As German troops approached the Soviet capital of Moscow, Stalin remained there and directed a scorched earth defensive policy, destroying any supplies or infrastructure that might benefit the enemy. The tide turned for the Soviets with the Battle of Stalingrad from August 1942 to February 1943, during which the Red Army defeated the Germans and eventually drove them from Russia. Stalin did not meddle with age. He prosecuted a reign of terror, purges, executions, exile to labor camps, and persecutions in the post-war USSR, suppressing all dissent and anything that smacked of foreign, especially Western, influence. He established communist governments throughout Eastern Europe, and in 1949 led the Soviets into the nuclear age by exploding an atomic bomb. In 1950, he gave North Korea's communist leader Kim Il-sung permission to invade United States-supported South Korea, an event that triggered the Korean War, who grew increasingly paranoid in his later years, died on March 5, 1953, at age 74 after suffering a stroke. His body was embalmed and preserved in the Lenin's mausoleum in Moscow's Red Square until 1961, when it was removed and buried near the Kremlin walls as part of the de-Stalinization process initiated by Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev. Some estimates he was responsible for the deaths of 20 million people during his brutal rule.